this is not me, I'm not a mic person. My friends always telling me, won't you get up there, you always telling jokes. Well, I got a best friend, and we went to the club. She drinks a lot. And I told her, I said, won't you try smoking some marijuana? She said, oh, you're the marijuana head. I said, yeah, you're right. She said, you need to go to NA. I said, what is NA? Never again? She said, no. She said, I go to AA. I said, well, how often do you apply? Annually? What is AA? Annually? So she said, hey, look, I'm going to try your smoke. I said, okay, fine. So we came from a club. I mean, we were toasted. We were walking that, drop the mic. We were walking down the street, and she said, why is these people following us? She said, you know, I get paranoid off of marijuana. So she says, why are these people following us? I said, ain't nobody following us. We're in New York. Who's following us? So we were walking. She said, they're following us. I said, they're going to work. They're going wherever they're going. She says, no, they following us. I said, well, stop. Let's see how far they go. So we stopped. They went past us. She said, one of them touched my butt. I said, they ain't touch your butt. You got plastic on your feet because your feet hurts. She said, yeah, they didn't touch that. So anyway, get off of that. So I got it, you know, I sit home a lot, and I heard you know how you hear things in your house, creepy things and things that make noise and stuff. So I'm sitting there watching a good picture, and I heard my door, somebody knocking at my door, and I said, knocking at my door. So I go to open it, nobody there. So I said, okay, sit back down, knock, knock again. I said, and I hear the wind. So I said, who there? So I went to close the door. They said, why are you closing? I said, oh shit. So I said, well, you can come in, but don't bother me. Sit down and look at TV with me. So we looking at TV, and then I get around my friends again. And then I remember this man, he had the finger ring. They said you're supposed to keep your hands flat. And I got the same thing he got. So when I'm talking to people, and they looking at my hands, and my fingers like this, and I say, I'm not giving you the finger, I'm fucking you. So I said, forget that. I said, you know what, it's the thing. I got arthritis in this finger, and it don't bend. So when I'm talking to you, it look like I'm doing this. And if you take it seriously, hey, that's on you. You don't take it serious, enjoy you while it's there. I don't know what to say about that. But anyway, I was telling Doris, her husband Dan, she was sitting next to me, and her husband Dan said, that's my wife over there. When y'all looked over there, y'all didn't look at Doris, y'all looked at me. I said, Dan, I'm not your wife. I said, well, you got black Chinese over there too then, or Korean. So I said, okay. I said, well, wait a minute. Let me think about this. I tell people I talk all languages, as long as the answer is no. So I say, okay. So they said, well, Yolanda, you like making people laugh all the time. I said, yeah. I said, I got 3 names. My friends call me New York City because of my first name. My nickname is Nan. My first name is Yolanda, and my last name is Curry. So I said, Nan is my nickname, Yolanda's my business name, and Curry's my athletic name. So now Stephen Curry's my cousin. So I said, okay, Steph, you can be my cousin. When you gonna get to know me? So anyway, I do like playing basketball. I got a scholarship for that. That was nice. But I never went to classes. I did go to one class, gym. But anyway, like I said, you know how you have friends and you try to have a good time with everybody. You don't want to sit around, and I don't like people to come to my house and we sitting there and nobody saying nothing. Why you come? I want, tell me something. You know, we sitting there, both of us just sitting there not saying nothing. I said, boy, that's why I look at TV. They talk to me more than you do. Go home, bye. So you telling me to go home now? I said, when you're gonna say something, bark, do something, me and her. He said, oh, I'm gonna do something one day. I said, no, you're not gonna do it in my house. Go, bye. I literally threw him out. I said, you gotta go. I said, you don't talk no language. You don't speak no English. You don't speak nothing. So I said, okay. But before I go, I'm gonna tell you 2 jokes. One, I got a good friend named Jose. He told me, he said, Yolanda, I'm very famous. I said, Jose, you just like us, poor broke. He said, no, I'm famous. I said, how come you're not on TV? He said, no, I'm famous. I said, well, how you famous? He said, you know, everybody know my name. I said, okay. He said, you know how you know my name? I said, no. He said, you know my name because you sing it all the time. I said, what I say? He said, Jose. I said, Jose. They say Jose. He said, see, I told you I'm famous. I said, okay. Now, the last joke I'm going to tell you before I get down. One of my friends is Mexican, and she's always telling me jokes. She said, Yolanda, I'm going to tell you a joke. I said, am I going to get in trouble for it? She said, nah, it ain't racist. So I said, wait a minute. The lady asked me last time, she said, are you black, Negro, African American? What do you like to be called? I said, Yolanda. So anyway, she told me this joke. She said, Yolanda, why did a Mexican throw his wife off the roof? I said, I don't know. He said, tequila. So thank you very much. I don't know about heights.
Thank you.